Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're going on a journey into the fascinating world of fungi. Like getting a personal biology lesson on these incredible organisms. You mentioned you wanted to explore more biology, right? And I think you'll find fungi super interesting. We usually only notice, mushrooms, those little pops of color in the forest. But there's a whole hidden universe beneath the surface, a vast network of life, as crucial to our planet as the air we breathe.
Yeah, and the cool thing is, people often mistake fungi for plants. But they're totally different. They have their own kingdom, a unique way of life, playing a role in the ecosystem that's completely separate from plants or animals.
Okay, so I'm picturing my old biology textbook.
Yeah.
Fungi are not plants.
Right.
Got it. What makes them so different?
One of the biggest differences is how they eat. Fungi are heterotrophs, which means, unlike plants, they don't make their own food. No photosynthesis for these guys. They have to get their nutrients from other sources. Imagine them as like nature's ultimate recyclers, breaking down organic matter, absorbing the nutrients they need to survive.
So they're like the ultimate composters, breaking down all that dead stuff.
Exactly. They're essential for decomposition and nutrient cycling, keeping our ecosystems healthy, balanced. But to really understand how they do this, we need to zoom in to the fascinating world of hyphae and mycelium.
Okay, I'm ready for my microscopic adventure. Hyphae and mycelium. What are those exactly?
So picture a single thread, like a tiny root. But instead of absorbing water, it secretes these powerful enzymes that break down food externally. That's a hyphae. And when you have a massive network of these hyphae all tangled together, that's a mycelium. Think of it like a giant web spreading through the soil or even inside, like a decaying log.
Whoa, so it's like they have an external digestion system, breaking down food outside their bodies and then absorbing the nutrients? That's pretty wild. But how big can these mycelia get?
Oh, you're going to love this. There's a single honey mushroom fungus in Oregon. Spreads over, get this, 8.9 square kilometers. It's considered the largest organism on Earth by area, and scientists estimate it's thousands of years old.
Thousands of years old. I can't even wrap my head around that. Something that massive, living underground, spreading its web of hyphae. It really shows you just how much is going on beneath the surface. But if they're not making their own food like plants, are all fungi just decomposing dead matter?
Well, a lot of fungi are saprophytes. That means they get their nutrients from, decomposing organic matter, like a fallen log covered in mushrooms. They break down those complex compounds, returning vital nutrients to the soil.
So they're like nature's cleanup crew, breaking down all that dead stuff, making those nutrients available again. It's like a continuous cycle of life and decay.
But what about the fungi that don't just eat dead things? Are there other ways they get their nutrients?
You're right. Not all fungi are content with just decomposing. Some fungi are parasites, meaning they get their nutrients from living organisms, sometimes causing harm in the process.
Oh, so like the fungus that causes athlete's foot, not exactly a friendly relationship, is it? Not exactly. Parasitic fungi have evolved some pretty clever ways of getting their nutrients. They can penetrate the cells of their host using these specialized hyphae called haustoria. They're like tiny little siphons extracting the nutrients they need.
So they're kind of like tiny vampires.
Well, not always. Some parasitic fungi actually coexist with their host, causing minimal harm. It's a delicate balance. They need their host to survive, right, to keep benefiting from the relationship.
Okay, so it's not always a hostile takeover. Sometimes it's more like a long-term lease. But you mentioned another type of relationship earlier, something about symbiosis.
Oh, yeah. One of the coolest things about fungi is how they form these mutually beneficial relationships with other organisms. And a perfect example is mycorrhiza, a partnership between fungi and plants.
Mycorrhiza, yeah. Remind me how that works again.
Okay, picture the hyphae of a fungus intertwining with the roots of a plant. That's a mycorrhiza. The fungus extends the plant's root system, helping it absorb water and nutrients more efficiently from the soil. In return, the plant gives the fungus sugars. Produced through photosynthesis, it's win-win.
So it's like a team effort where everyone benefits. Plant gets extra nutrients, fungus gets a sweet reward, makes you realize how interconnected everything is in nature. But I'm curious, how do fungi actually spread and reproduce? They can't exactly walk around and plant seeds, right?
Right. They have their own unique way of spreading their offspring. They can reproduce both asexually and sexually, often relying on spores.
Spores, those tiny dust-like things that float in the air. I always wondered what those were.
Exactly. Spores are like the fungal version of seeds, incredibly lightweight, which allows them to be carried by wind, water, even animals, over long distances. And just like seeds, spores can germinate, grow into new fungi when they land in the right environment.
Wow, so they can travel far and wide. Explains why they're found in so many different habitats.
Yeah.
But how do scientists even begin to classify this huge diversity of fungi? We've already talked about decomposers, parasites, those that form symbiotic relationships. Is there, like, a system to it all?
Absolutely. Scientists classify fungi based on their reproductive structures and their life cycles. There are four main groups: zygospore fungi, club fungi, sac fungi, and imperfect fungi.
Okay, so it's all about how they make more fungi. Let's start with those zygospore fungi. What makes them so special?
You know that black bread mold you sometimes see? That's a classic example of a zygospore fungus. They get their name from the structures they form during sexual reproduction. Zygospores. Imagine a zygospore like a hardened bunker, protecting the fungus's genetic material until conditions improve, like a fungal time capsule.
So it's their survival strategy for tough times. But what about their everyday reproduction? How does that work?
For their everyday asexual reproduction, they use sporangia. These are structures that produce and release asexual spores. Think of them like tiny spore factories, churning out offspring to spread the fungus.
Okay, so they've got their tough zygospores
Yeah.
for survival,
Mm.
and their sporangia for spreading their genes. Pretty clever. But what about those club fungi, the ones that produce the mushrooms we're all familiar with?
Now, those are the ones that really capture the imagination. Those mushrooms we see, they're actually just the fruiting bodies of the fungus, like the tip of the iceberg. The majority of the fungus is hidden underground, a vast network of mycelia spreading through the soil.
So the mushroom is just the reproductive part, designed to release spores. It's amazing how much is happening beneath the surface. How do those mushrooms actually produce spores?
They have these club-shaped structures called basidia lining the gills underneath the mushroom cap. And that's actually where they get their name, Basidiomyces.
Uh-huh. Basidiomycetes is all starting to connect now. So the basidia produce the spores. That spread the fungus.
You got it. And those spores can travel, incredible distances on the wind, sometimes landing miles away from the parent mushroom, starting new colonies.
It's amazing. But are all club fungi the same? I mean, there's a ton of different mushrooms out there.
Oh, absolutely. There's incredible diversity within the Basidiomycetes. Think of puffballs. You step on them and they release a cloud of spores. Or bracket fungi growing on trees, looking like shelves.
Oh.
And then you have the less appreciated ones, like smuts and rusts, which are plant pathogens. Can cause some serious damage to crops.
So even within this one group, you've got a huge range of forms and functions. Remarkable. But we still got two more groups to cover, right? Sac fungi and imperfect fungi. What sets them apart?
Well, the sac fungi, or Ascomycetes, are actually the largest group of fungi, and they include everything from those powdery mildews you might see on plants to, those delicious morels that people love to forage for in the spring.
From powdery mildew to morels, that's quite a range. What do they have in common?
Well, they're named for their defining feature. It's a sac-like structure called an ascus. That's where they produce their spores during sexual reproduction, like a tiny pouch, holding and releasing the spores.
Okay, another group named after the reproductive structures. It's all making more sense now. But do they only reproduce sexually?
No, actually, most sac fungi reproduce asexually most of the time, producing spores called conidia. Think of them like tiny clones of the parent fungus.
So they've got options: sexual reproduction for genetic diversity, asexual reproduction for rapid spread. Sounds like fungi have evolved a lot of different strategies to make sure they survive. But what about that last group, the imperfect fungi? What makes them imperfect?
That's a good question. They're called imperfect because, well, scientists haven't observed them reproducing sexually. They only reproduce asexually using those conidia spores, just like some sac fungi.
So they're kind of a mystery group, at least when it comes to their sex lives. But even though we haven't seen them reproduce sexually, they're still important, right?
Absolutely. In fact, some of them produce compounds that are super valuable to humans. Think of penicillin. It's produced by the penicillium mold, right? Saved countless lives. And then there's cyclosporin, used to suppress the immune system after organ transplants.
Wow. So even though we don't fully understand their reproductive cycle, they're still vital in medicine. Pretty amazing.
It really is. Just goes to show you the world of fungi is full of surprises. There's still so much we don't know about these fascinating organisms. It's pretty amazing, right? How much we depend on these fungi without even realizing it. They're like hidden heroes.
Totally. Speaking of hidden, we were talking about how scientists haven't observed sexual reproduction. In those imperfect fungi. Why is sexual reproduction so important for fungi anyway?
That's a great question. So sexual reproduction, it involves mixing genetic material from two parents. This leads to offspring with new combinations of genes, which is super important for adaptation, evolution. It's like shuffling a deck of cards. You get a whole new hand each time.
So it's like nature's way of, experimenting with different combinations to see what works best in a changing environment. Makes sense. But wouldn't it be easier for fungi to just, clone themselves through asexual reproduction all the time? Seems like a lot less work.
Well, there's a trade-off. Asexual reproduction. It's great for spreading quickly, colonization, right? But all the offspring are genetically identical to the parent. That can be a problem in a changing environment where genetic diversity is key for survival.
So it's like putting all your eggs in one basket. If the environment changes and those clones aren't adapted, they can all be wiped out.
Exactly. Sexual reproduction helps, hedge against those risks. By introducing variation, it's like having a backup plan, making sure at least some offspring have the traits they need to survive and thrive, even when the world changes.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's switch gears for a sec. Back to those club fungi. The mushrooms. We were saying how the mushrooms we see are just the fruiting bodies, the reproductive structures. What makes them actually form those mushrooms? It's not like they're popping up all the time.
You're right. Mushroom formation is all about timing and those environmental cues. When conditions are just right, moisture, temperature, nutrient availability, the mycelium, that hidden network of hyphae, will start to form these compact masses. We call them buttons.
So those little buttons you sometimes see popping up in the ground, those are baby mushrooms.
Exactly. And as the button grows, it pushes up through the soil, expanding, developing into that classic mushroom shape. It's like a time-lapse video of a flower blooming, but with a mushroom.
That's a hidden world coming to life.
Yeah.
But what about those sac fungi? We talk about how they're the biggest group, most diverse. What makes them so successful? Is it just because they can produce both sexual and asexual spores?
Well, that definitely helps. But their success is also because they're so adaptable. They've evolved to live in so many different habitats, lifestyles. Some are saprophytes, breaking down organic matter, like leaves. Others are parasites, living off of plants or even animals. And then there are the ones that form those mycorrhizal relationships.
With plants, right, helping them get nutrients from the soil.
So they've got a strategy for almost every niche. It's like they figured out how to make a living everywhere. But I'm curious, are there any more unusual examples of sac fungi? We talked about morels, but what else is out there?
Well, there are truffles, of course. Those culinary delicacies, people go crazy for them. They grow underground, often near tree roots. And they have this intense aroma, earthy.
Yeah.
Some people find it irresistible, including pigs, actually. They're often used to sniff them out.
Truffle hunting with a pig. That's definitely going on my bucket list.
Oh, it's quite an experience. But, beyond the fancy food, some sac fungi have pretty remarkable abilities. For example, there's this species, cordyceps. It infects insects, turns them into, like, zombies. Zombies. You're kidding. Tell me more about this cordyceps fungus.
It's a crazy example of parasitic manipulation. The cordyceps spores infect an insect, and then the fungal hyphae start growing inside, taking over its nervous system, changing its behavior.
So the fungus is controlling the insect's brain. That's creepy.
Yeah.
What does it make the insect do?
Well, let's say it's an ant, right? The fungus makes it climb up to a high point, like a blade of grass, a branch. The ant latches on and dies. And then the fungus grows out of the ant's body, releasing its spores into the air to infect more ants.
It's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
I know, right? But it's just another example of how incredible, how complex the fungal world is. There's still so much we have to learn about these organisms.
I'm realizing we've only just, scratched the surface here. It's a world full of surprises, beneficial partnerships, parasitic mind control. Before we wrap up, I want to go back to those imperfect fungi. We talked about how they're useful to humans.
Yeah.
But what about their ecological roles? What do they do in the wild?
That's a great point. Even though we haven't seen them reproduce sexually, they still have important jobs. Some are decomposers, breaking down organic matter, recycling nutrients, just like other fungi. Others help with nutrient cycling, changing nitrogen, other elements into forms that plants can use.
So even though they're imperfect in terms of how we understand their reproduction, they're still contributing to the ecosystem.
Exactly. And some imperfect fungi even form those symbiotic relationships with plants, helping them grow. They may not be as well studied as some other fungi, but they're definitely not insignificant.
It's crazy how much we're still learning about fungi. Every time I think I understand them, something new pops up that blows my mind.
I know, me too. The more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know. They're truly a kingdom full of wonder, mystery.
It really makes you think, how much we still don't know about fungi. They've been around forever, shaping our planet,
Right.
and we're only now starting to really appreciate them, their diversity, how important they are.
Absolutely. And, the more we learn about fungi, the more we discover ways they can benefit us. We already talked about medicine like penicillin,
Yeah.
but that's just the tip of the iceberg, really.
Yeah, penicillin is the classic example.
Yeah.
What are some of the newer applications
Mhm.
that people are exploring?
One area that's really exciting is bioremediation, using fungi to, clean up polluted environments like soil, water contaminated with toxins, heavy metals, that kind of thing.
So it's like harnessing nature's cleanup crew to deal with some of the messes we've created. Pretty cool. How does that even work?
Well, some fungi can actually break down pollutants, like they digest them, transform those toxins into less harmful substances. It's like a built-in detox system.
Wow. So they're kind of eating the pollution.
You could say that. They're taking these harmful substances, breaking them down into their basic components, and then those can be recycled back into the environment.
So it's not just about cleanup. It's about restoring balance.
Exactly. And beyond bioremediation, people are also looking into using fungi for new materials, sustainable materials.
Really? Like what? I can't picture mushroom furniture or something.
Not quite, more like packaging materials,
Yeah.
building insulation, even textiles, all made from fungi.
Okay, so using fungi to build stuff. How does that work?
So mycelium, that network of hyphae, right, it can grow into these really strong structures,
Mhm.
resilient. Scientists are figuring out how to, manipulate them, create materials with specific property.
So, you grow the material
Mm.
instead of making it in a factory. That's a pretty wild concept.
It is, and it could be incredibly sustainable. Fungal materials are biodegradable, renewable. They often take less energy and resources to produce compared to traditional materials.
It's exciting to think about the possibilities. Sounds like fungi could be, a key part of a more sustainable future. But with all this talk about the good stuff, it's worth remembering that not all fungi are our friends, right? We mentioned those parasitic fungi that cause diseases. Are there other downsides? Things we should be aware of.
Yeah, good point. It's important to, approach fungi with respect, caution. Just like any other powerful force in nature, some fungi produce toxins that can harm humans, animals. It's important to be able to identify those, avoid them.
So we learn about poisonous plants.
Mm,
We should also learn about potentially harmful fungi, especially if we're thinking about foraging for mushrooms.
exactly. A good field guide is essential. Know what you're looking at, and if you're ever unsure, better to be safe than sorry. Leave it alone.
Hmm.
There are plenty of delicious, safe fungi out there. No need to take risks.
Good advice. Well, this deep dive has been amazing, a real journey into the world of fungi. We talked about their biology, their role in the ecosystem, those incredible relationships with other organisms, and even how they might help us, solve some of humanity's problems.
It's been fun exploring this hidden kingdom with you. Hopefully our listeners feeling a little more curious about fungi now.
Me too. Fungi are incredible, and the more we learn, the more we realize there's so much more to discover. So, to our listener, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep being amazed by the beauty of the fungal world. Who knows what we'll find next? In this often overlooked kingdom of life. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.